so glad, for us all to be back together here on the screen and for us to hear from you once again. We've got a big day coming up, August 1st being the opening of the CommonApp that our rising seniors will use for their college applications. So tonight, everyone, that's why we're here, is to discuss what to prepare for when it comes to the CommonApp account that your students will need to create and filling out those applications. So Mark will talk for a few minutes and then answer any questions that you all have when it comes to the CommonApp. Mark, welcome. Take it away.
Thanks for the grand introduction there, Leah. So yeah, I hope everyone's enjoying their summer. I'm sorry to start making you guys think about school and college, but there are some important things that are out there that we're all going to begin talking about pretty soon. So if you're not familiar with me, I'm the one leading our Next Step Coach program. So all the rising seniors should have a familiarity with who I am. If you are still confused about any topic that I'm covering today, please reach out to me, okay? My email is mark, M-A-R-K, at brainsofbrawnllc.com. You guys can hit me up. That's absolutely something I would love to have conversations about. These things are impactful. There are a lot of moving parts, and it is extremely confusing for somebody, especially if you haven't gone through this with another child or if you haven't applied to college in a while. These things change year to year. So we want to make sure that you're ready to go. Leah just put my email in the chat. So if you want to open that up, you can copy that down. And we're going to record this and upload it. So if I'm moving really quickly and you're like scrambling to take notes, don't feel like you have to stay on pace. You can come back to this later once we upload it and send it out. So I'd rather you be attentive and be able to ask questions than just like, transcribe everything down. There are some confusing topics that we're going to break into here. So if you have questions, please raise your hand or click raise hand or just unmute yourself or whatever works best for you. And Leah will help me kind of field those questions as they come in, okay? I'm going to do my best to make it as simple as possible. We're also going to have some other conversations about other important topics, but I'm going to allude and foreshadow some of those this evening. If you are unsure about these, especially things along the lines of early decision and early action and single choice and restrictive early action, that's extremely important. There are certain schools that if you do not apply early, they do not consider you for merit aid, so they will not consider you for academic scholarships as much if you're not on the early application cycle. And that important date for most schools will be November 1st. If this sounds foreign to you, please email me. Okay, these things can literally be tens of thousands of dollars. So Leah, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, which I'll do as soon as I can. Okay. Okay, guys. So I'm just going to go into present mode here. Leah, it's going to make it really difficult for me to watch people on the side. So if you want to just like unmute yourself anytime anyone has a question, if it gets popped into the chat. So guys, we're diving into the CommonApp. There are other main ways of applying. You'll hear about the Coalition app and some other pretty common terms. Then certain schools have certain portals like MIT. If your child takes a wild hair and wants to apply to MIT, they have their own unique portal. But the CommonApp is the most widely used, and 99% of students use the CommonApp for at least a few of their schools, okay? It's accepted by, I think, over 900 schools. So overview of what we're going to cover. We're going to talk a little bit about application terms and definitions, just so you guys will understand what I'm talking about when I say restrictive early versus early decision. We're going to talk about the CommonApp itself, the different parts, how to get a good gradient of a college list out there, getting your letters of recommendation through the school, which Leah and the school will be very helpful with. And then the essays, breaking out what the CommonApp and the personal statement actually are, a general timeline, and then actually applying, and then some other things that the Crosstown team will help you out with around the application fees and fee waivers, okay? So diving in, some of the terms, these might be a little daunting. The FAFSA, you've probably seen that or heard that before. Every single student will fill this out, okay? It's the federal application for federal, or free application for federal student aid, and every single institution uses this. And then there are a couple lesser known, like the CSS is something that a few schools may look for. It's non-federal financial aid. And then there's also another one that might come in for 4 to 6% of schools called the IDOC. If you see that, you'll be requested from the school to submit information. They do give you pretty thorough outlines for what you have to submit, and the FAFSA is pretty straightforward. They'll ask you for certain lines off your tax return. So if you have any of that, that opens up on October 1st. So you have a little bit of time on the FAFSA, okay? Internal scholarships. This is our own internal way of outlining this just to try to make it simple. Internal scholarships are like school-specific scholarships, okay? So if you're going to apply to a certain institution, they may have an internal scholarship that if you get accepted, you may become eligible for that at that institution. Then there are external scholarships like the Coca-Cola scholarship. We're actually hoping to offer one through Brains Brawn for the first graduating class ourselves that will be able to be used at any school, okay? And typically they'll outline what you can use it for, but it's usually used for room and board and tuition or external educational expenses like textbooks. Regular decision. So regular decision is the typical application cycle decision time when you would apply. Most schools recognize December 31st of a student's senior year as that deadline. There are some schools that go into January. You will see a few that may be as late as February 1st, but regular decision typically is December 31st. Early decision, this is extremely important. So early decision and early action, we don't want you to get confused there. Early decision is the ability to apply early that is binding, okay? Vanderbilt is a good example of that. Vanderbilt has 2 early decision cycles. If you apply early to Vanderbilt on November 1st and they accept you, you have a binding agreement to go there, okay? That is a little bit of a risk because you will not necessarily have the opportunity to apply to other schools or hear other financial offers or even understand exactly what you might be paying to go to a school like Vanderbilt, okay? Then there is early action. Early action typically has the same deadline of November 1st, but it is non-binding, okay? So if you do an early action application and you do receive an acceptance, you will have that as essentially a trump card in your back pocket while you can still go through the regular decision cycle and then potentially have 2 opportunities to apply to schools, okay? So you could apply to an institution that has early action on November 1st, they could say no, and then you could apply again December 31st, and they may say yes. That's actually what happened to me myself for Yale University, okay? So it's not that rare that that happens. And then deferment, not being accepted, but your application is looked at again. That's what happened to me. That's what I was just explaining. The CommonApp, the application for hundreds of colleges and universities, and we'll go more in detail here onto this. The transcript, you guys should be familiar with these. These come through the school. They're the official document that outline your academic performance at Crosstown. Recommendation letters. So we'll go into more about this. These are letters from teachers, educators, and people you've worked with closely who should know you very well. They should be able to talk more about you than just did you turn in assignments on time and get an A in class. We always encourage students to try to find somebody who they've had for multiple classes or multiple years versus somebody who's a teacher in their senior year who they might have just met, especially if you're applying early. You might have a 2-month-long relationship with that teacher versus a year-long with somebody else that had you for junior year. Feel free to ask questions if you do have them, okay? So what is the CommonApp? It's a single application system, an application portal that is used for over 900 four-year universities, okay? And you can fill out one form. They have a list of 7 prompts that we'll get into here in a second, and you can send it out to institutions that are partnered with the CommonApp. Like I said, there's over 900 here. You can search your institution. Be very careful that you're looking for your school. There are more than 5,300 educational institutions after high school out there. A lot of them have very similar names, okay? Every year I have that on my one-on-one clients. I had a girl last year who thought she had applied to Columbia University and she'd applied to Columbia College. I had a person one time who thought they had applied to Amherst College and they'd applied to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. So be very diligent when you're reading those because there's so many schools out there and sometimes the names conflate a little bit. And then it also helps you keep track of different deadlines and requirements that should all be imported into the CommonApp so you can just see it in one place. A lot of schools only use the CommonApp. There are other application systems like the California college system, Apply Texas, the Coalition app. Most schools that use the Coalition app also use the Common App. So go through, if you are a parent or a student, after this meeting or as soon as you watch this video, and look at the schools that you're interested in applying to and see if they use the Common App. And if they don't, figure out what they use as an alternative, okay? Short exercise, it will not take you long. Common App has a very simple database that you can just search through, okay? So we're looking here at some parts here. The college search will help you find schools of interest, okay? It's pretty helpful if you have no idea of where to go. We also strongly advise you talk to your counselors and your next step coaches about this too, right? So that you have schools that are aligned with your interests and your relative academic background. My Colleges is a list of colleges that you're interested in applying to. There's a tracker grid that allows you to keep track of each school's requirements. Some schools have additional requirements that are on top of the general Common App issues. They're called, typically, we refer to them as supplemental essays. And in the Common App, there's a few different pages here. You get walked through it pretty simply. Profile, which is just some of your basic information. Family, information about your parents. Education, your background in high school. Any other opportunities that you might have pursued. Testing, your standardized test scores. That would come down to the ACT, SAT. If you took any subject tests before they were removed from the options to take a couple years ago. AP tests. Activities, listing out your extracurriculars, things inside and outside of school. Writing, school-specific essays, short answers. This is also where your supplemental writing will come in. Not all schools require supplemental pieces, and they will tell you if they do. And then your courses and grades. And then your Common App essay here. So we'll dive into this here in just a second a bit more, but there are 7 different prompts, okay? If you are a student and you're willing to get ahead, please go to Common App's website. I think it's extremely valuable to start outlining your essay. The official date of opening for Common App is August 1st. The 7 essay topics were released on February 16th. They're already out there, all right? It's extremely helpful. If you are a parent of a rising junior and you want to get them ahead, have them outline 3 or 4 of these essays so that when they do become a rising senior, they already have an essay written that they can use for their personal statement. The personal statement is going to be the longest one for almost every single school. The supplemental pieces are usually pretty short. So if Vanderbilt requires 3 additional essays, they're usually like 300 words long. The Common App essay, though, goes, it's 250 to 600 words. So it'll be a little longer, and it's going to be the most impactful because it'll be the one that goes to every single school. The supplemental pieces are specific to each school, but you can get really far ahead. And if you're a parent, or even if you're a rising junior, you can already start writing these. And if you're a rising senior, I strongly encourage you guys, go out there, look at the Common App topics. They were released on February 16th. They will not change. There are 6 different prompts plus 1 open-ended 7th option, where if you have a really strong piece of writing, you can upload that, okay? We'll talk a bit more about this, but the essay, you got to really make sure that this is, I'm sure you guys put all your effort into every single essay that you submit for classes, but this will be the most impactful essay up to this point. So really pour a ton of energy into it, okay? So when we're starting to prepare our college list, we're going to search for colleges. We're going to be looking at a few different things. If you're still on the fence about how to choose a good college for you, do they offer the programs? Do they offer the degrees? Do they offer the studies that you are really interested in pursuing? Don't just go to a school because of the name or because of the proximity or because of the cost. If it's not going to offer what you want to actually study, you're not going to enjoy your time there, okay? Is the location something you're cool with? Do you want to be in that geographic area? There's schools all across the country, right? Are you aligned academically, right? Is this school something that's within reach? And we all have different academic abilities. And if we've had certain scores, we can look up the average scores, the average GPA, the average plus, and just try to make sure that we're on the right page. And we'll get into that here in just a second. And also, it's important to think about the affordability, but I also always want to make sure that students and parents understand that especially really seemingly expensive schools have very different amounts paid than the amount that is listed as their tuition, okay? The more expensive the school generally, and this is a huge generalization, but you can look this up. the more likely they are to offer need-based financial aid. And the example I always give through my alma mater is just because I got to go basically for free. Yale University for the 2021-22 tuition is $80,575 a year. A lot of parents and a lot of students see that and they're like, $80,000 a year? All right, we'll cross that off my list, okay? When I got into Yale, my dad made $13.75 an hour. My mom didn't have a job, and there was no chance I could have afforded that. But it actually cost me less money to go there than it would have cost me to stay in state, okay? Because they have 100% need-based financial aid. So for me, it cost me less. The average kid that goes to Yale pays less money to attend to that school than the average kid that's in state going to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, okay? So not every single school has need-based financial aid, but if you're crossing schools off of your list simply because of the cost, look to see if they do have any kind of need-based aid. Need-based aid is often called need-blind aid because your ability to afford that school will not change whether they accept you or not, okay? I harp on that a lot because, I mean, so many students overlook schools that seem cost prohibitive, and it's often at their detriment. If you have questions about that, please let me know. I can send you some resources so you can see the difference between the list price and what people actually pay, okay? Lastly, we're going to talk about applying to a range of schools. I'm sure this is terminology you've all heard before. Safety schools are schools that you're above their average on a lot of the different metrics, okay? And we're talking about the standardized tests, the GPA. You're pretty confident you're going to get in there. Target schools are ones that are aligned, okay? So if the average student applying to a certain school has a 27 on the ACT and a 3.4 GPA, and you've got a 3.4 GPA and a 27 or a 28 on the ACT, that'd be a target school. Reach schools are schools that if you do a really good job, you think you have a really good chance, but it's a little less likely than your target schools, okay? We expect kids to have a little bit of each. A sweet spot, depending on how much money you're gonna spend and if you're using fee waivers, I like to have 3 to 4 of each of these for students, depending on their competitiveness. Especially with the safety schools, a lot of times the safety schools are called CommonApp only, meaning after you write that personal statement, that might be the only additional piece of writing you need for that school. You don't have to write 3 additional essays for those schools, so it might actually be easier than you think. You might just type in their name and use a fee waiver code and be okay. Okay, and have a reasonable number of schools on your list. I see this every year where students will have, okay, I applied to 4 schools, 3 of them had an average ACT score that was 4 points above my score, and I don't know what happened, but I only got into 1 school and I didn't want to go there anyway, okay? Apply to enough schools so that you have a chance of going someplace that you're going to be happy being for 4 years, okay? We're going to dive a little into the letters of recommendation. I did mention this before. So these are important. They're going to help out with your application. They're required for the CommonApp, and it's important to find people that know you well enough to actually write about who you are. Not about how many times you showed up late to class or anything like that, but actually have a working relationship with you that was longer than 1 course, okay? We always say, ask people who have a little bit of a history working with you, you know, especially don't be afraid to ask somebody who might have seen like you go through, you know, struggles, like you started out freshman year, not putting in the work, and then you turned it around, because they can tell a really good story about your hard work and how much effort you put in to create change in your own academics. Don't just go for the teacher whose class you had the highest grade in. Go for somebody who you feel like can really write a good, meaningful essay for you. And make sure, a couple things, reach out to that person before you put them on their list, because 1, you want them to at least know that they're going to be writing a letter. Also, teachers are busy. So if they get a bunch of requests for these essays a night before it's due, think about how you would feel if somebody asked you to write a long essay, 15 long essays, and you got that notification at 10 p.m. and it was due the next day at 9, okay? Just be considerate. I guarantee they're gonna be in a much better state of mind and write you a much better essay if you approach them and say, hey, look, I'm thinking about applying to University of Tennessee and I would love for you to write my letter of rec. Are you cool doing that? Okay, you've got 3 weeks to do it. Here's your timeline. That's a much better approach than just typing their email in at midnight the night before it's due, okay? And they're gonna write a much better letter for you because they're gonna be much more pleased with your approach, okay? It's extremely important. I see this all the time. Don't just go to the English teachers. Don't just go to the people that you think will write the best, most eloquent letter. That's always a okay approach, but go to the people that you have a really good history with. Everyone on the Crosstown staff can write a really meaningful letter if they know you well, okay? 2 to 3 weeks, extremely important. Don't push these deadlines, okay? And then check in with them. Once you've put their name in, ask them, hey, how's it going? I know you're busy, but I wanted to know if you sent my letter in. You're not going to see the letter, but you just need to make sure that it gets in, okay? Essays and supplemental writings. So I know it's a little small. I would like for you guys to all look in and start authoring these essays yourself. But here are the 7 prompts, okay? If you notice anything, it's that they're pretty cliche and they're pretty dry. Don't write a cliche essay in response. You have to be, I see a raised hand, Carol.
Yes. So I'm looking down at topic number 7, share an essay on any topic of your choice. It could be one that you've already written. How long are these essays before I decide which essay to send?
Good question. So you got 250 to 600 words to tell your story. So what's really important, more important than that, good question, but more important than that is, what is the topic of that past writing? And a lot of students conflate these prompts and think that these prompts are the topic, okay? So they'll tell a really cool story about number 4 here, where someone helped them out in a surprising way, and they tell this story of how great their uncle is, who supported them and paid for them to go to this cool summer program. You need to write an essay where you are the topic, okay? You're talking to somebody who has never met you before. This is not your English teacher who you've worked with for 2 years and have a working relationship with. It's also a little different because it's not an argumentative or an analytical piece, which you may be more commonly used to doing in high school. It's a personal statement, right? It's about who you are. It's about the traits that have driven you to become the person that you are. And, you know, how are you going to impart those characteristics or, you know, qualities in their university to make their university a better place? So I see a lot of kids take number 7, and Carol, I'm glad you asked that question. And they'll submit their best essay ever about the War of 1812 and, you know, the ripple effects that it had on the subsequent decades. That might be a really well-written piece, but that's not what they're going to want to see. They're not looking for your strength in writing necessarily as much as they're looking for who you are, okay? You're submitting a lot of binary things that are your grades, you know, your class rank, your extracurriculars. This is your chance for your personality to come through. I strongly advise looking at really successful essays from the past. You can find these online, okay? I love doing that, especially with the supplemental pieces, because you don't want to write a typical like rubric essay where you've got an introduction, 3 main points with supporting evidence and a conclusion. If your introduction has your thesis and it's like, you know, the time that I challenged a belief or idea was, you know, I was in the 7th grade in middle school. That's not the essay that will get you into these schools, okay? So you have to be creative. You have to tell a cool story. I love using an anecdote or a flashback or something along those lines. And if you're having a hard time doing this or looking at what good looks like, I would start by looking up online options. You can see good essays that have gotten students into elite schools in the past, and that's helpful just to see like the style of writing and how it usually focuses. And if you're still confused, you need to have multiple people edit your essay. So if a lot of people are like, yeah, very forgettable essay, then that's probably what the admissions officers would think. So try to write something that will be the best piece of writing you've ever put together. I know it's a lot of pressure, but you have a lot of time. There's not a deadline tomorrow. I would start working on it now, okay? A lot of people get confused about this. There are 7 topics. You only pick one, okay? I like for students to outline at least 4 of these so that they can have a real conversation with the people that are going to help edit them about which is the best story, okay? Because you only get to submit one, spend time, go through all the options, try to put together outlines, and then see what the best essay is, not only in your opinion, but in the people who you trust to edit this, okay? And have people edit it that are going to be actually critics. If you've got a mom who always pats you on the back and tells you that everything is great and no matter what, it's great, that's awesome to have in your wheelhouse, but don't have her edit your essay because she's not going to give you any feedback. Have somebody who's going to be realistic and say like, hey man, you do need to make some changes. Because if that's the case, you want to put forth your best essay, okay? Go for people that are going to be able to understand the writing and make sure that they have the background to even look into the grammar, the subject verb agreement, all the little things, you know, that you might overlook because you're stressed out. All right. Also, some colleges have their own required essays or their own optional writing supplements, okay? You can find all of that. I have a link here, but I realize now that you can't click on that because this is a video. So I will send that out, Leah, if you want to send it out afterwards. You guys can find this on the CommonApp though. And this supplemental, optional, or required work is extremely important, and it can turn what looks like one essay out of these 7 into a lot of essays. If you apply to 10 schools and they all have 4 additional supplemental pieces, you're not submitting one essay, you're submitting 41 essays, okay? So that can change your timeline. So that's why it's important to look in here and see if they require extra stuff. Begin working on your essays now. If you have a draft that you think's great and everyone that edits it says it's not great, don't be afraid to rewrite it, okay? This is not a homework assignment that's due tomorrow. Give essays your own twist. Leave something that's memorable for the people reading it. Don't just write an essay like you're going to submit it with a quick deadline. You have plenty of time. Tell a unique story. Spend time. This is going to be the most impactful essay that you will write. It's also, honestly, the thing you have the most control over now. You can't go back in time and change that B to an A that you had freshman year, and that's not something you should worry about. But you can focus on this and really put your best foot forward. All right. So looking at the timeline here, CommonApp officially opens, meaning that you can start submitting stuff through the CommonApp on August 1st. But like I said, those essay topics are already out there. Please start writing out outlines at the very least. October 1st, the FAFSA. Parents are going to be probably helping out with this more than the students because it's going to go through a lot of their tax returns and things like that. Early November, November 1st from most schools is going to be their early decision 1 and early action application. There are some schools that have what they call early decision 2, and those deadlines are very different. Early decision 2 at Vanderbilt is November 15th, which is only 14 days later. Early decision 2 at Northeastern is like January 10th. So look at the deadlines, make sure you understand them. I like to build out a calendar. Ms. Keys has done a great job of sending out a calendar. Carol, I see another question.
Sorry, but when you said that when it comes to early decision, that is binding. So are you not able to not debate, but like go back and forth with the amount of money you could get as scholarships or financial aid after you already accept them? If that's what the problem is?
That's a good question. There's no single answer. I don't want to answer for all these schools, but let me try. So you can write a letter of appeal, which is something that we'll be talking about in a little bit. If you feel like their offer of merit was unfair, it's a little harder to do. When we write out letters of appeal, we usually like to have another offer where we can say, hey, look, this school is very similar to your school. And this school offered me $25,000 a year, and you guys offered me 18. Can you meet me in the middle? Early decision, though, is binding. Early action, often the same deadline, is not binding. So if you get in on early decision, you're bound to go there. You've made an agreement. Your parents have to sign off on your early decision application most of the time, especially if you're a minor at most schools, and you are agreeing to go there if you get accepted. So early decision, make sure that it is like, this is my rider. Like I would go to this school no matter what if they accept me. You know. Did that answer your question, Carol? I see your hand still up.
Oh, I just forgot to take it down, but yes.
Cool. All right. Mid-December, early decision 1 for that's when you'll hear back. And usually it's around December 15th. That should give you plenty of time. But if you apply early, don't wait till you've heard back to get everything ready for a regular decision. I always say, hope for the best and assume the worst, because if you're going to apply early to one school and you're going to apply to regular for another 8 schools, and if you wait until December 15th to hear back, then you've only got 16 days to get out the next 8 applications, okay? If they have supplemental pieces, that's going to be really hard to do, especially when you're in school and probably doing some tests and stuff. So assume that you didn't get in, have all your stuff ready to go. If you do get in, awesome. Have a great end of the year party, like enjoy yourself. But if not, you have everything ready to go and you can send it out. Okay. December 5th for most schools will be the last chance to take the SAT. 11th is going to be the last chance for the ACT. There are some schools that will let you continue taking it on rolling standards. So this is not at all binding, but I would look at your schools. And then January 1st or the 15th is early decision 2 and regular decision application deadline. So a lot of schools say midnight of your time zone, December 31st or January 1st. There are a few schools that put their regular decision deadline out until like January 15th, but look at that. Don't assume it's January 15th. Honestly, you should start on it now. And May 1st is the nationally recognized date to make your decision. Okay, so once schools have made their decision, you have to decide which school you will attend in the fall or defer for a gap year or whatever you choose. Okay. These are very important dates, but by no means are these dates all the same everywhere. These are general dates, but for some reason, schools can't get on the same page, and a lot of schools do varying dates. So don't end up in a bad situation. Do your research. Okay, this can all be found online. If you're confused, this can all be found by emailing mark@brainsofbrawnllc.com. Okay, I will get back to you. I'll give you this information. So start getting ready. Get the CommonApp account. I know that you have a little bit of time before August 1st, but go ahead and start looking at those essay prompts. It's never, ever, ever too early. They don't change year to year very much. So if you've got a rising sophomore, get them writing on it, like get them thinking through that vein. At least they'll have a little bit of practice. They're not submitting them. If you've got a rising senior, then they should absolutely be looking at this, bullet point outlines, then flesh out those outlines into real essays. Don't ever go on the short end of stuff. Don't ever submit a really short essay. You want to maximize the word count as much as you can within reason. Don't put in filler, but economy of language, and be very efficient with how you're writing these. If you have the opportunity to put down 450 words for a supplemental piece and you write in 86 words, that's not going to be good. Okay, tell your story. Do everything you can to maximize each word you get. Ask for your letters of recommendation. Leah, you guys start back August 9th. Is that right? So the seniors, rising seniors, should be knocking on doors on August 9th and 10th. Okay, go ask people. Think of it this way. If you've got a professor that's like, I can only write 12 letters of recommendation, would you not want to be one of the first people that asks them? Okay, especially if they know you really well. And then invite your guidance counselor because there are going to be certain things that they have to upload, like your official transcripts. Okay, make sure your parents understand that they're going to have to come into the mix here with the FAFSA and potentially the CSS. A lot of you are not going to have to worry about the CSS, but if you get an email from the school, it's similar to the FAFSA, it's just a non-federal application. Okay. There are some fees. I don't get any of this, but the application fees can get kind of pricey. So there are some fee waivers. You can be generally, this is another statement that I'm like, it's not a blanket statement, but generally if you've used fee waivers in the past for your SAT or ACT, for free or reduced lunch programs, anything like that, probably gonna be able to get some fee waivers for the CommonApp, okay, for some of these schools. Here are some of the fee waiver qualifications. If you've been eligible for the SAT, ACT fee waiver, if you're on the free or reduced lunch program federally, if your annual income is, I mean, you just gotta look through all these, make sure that you're understanding it, then reach out to Crosstown and they'll help you out with that. So, and there's another thing, don't wait till the last minute because it's not fair to the Crosstown team or to anyone. And you've got a better chance of getting all of this taken care of. Some of this can get pricey. If you're applying to 10 schools that cost $90 a piece, that's $900, okay? Or it could be no dollars if you get out in front of the game and get these fee waivers, okay? That's it on my end, guys. That is my effort at trying to make this as simple as possible. I do want to just go back really quickly to the early decision and early action. Those are kind of confusing for a lot of people. If you apply to an early decision school, you're not going to be able to apply to more than one. Okay, early decision is binding. So early decision schools say you can apply to an early decision school, but you have to make it your top choice. And if you get in, you have to go there. Early action. Traditionally, there was early action, and early action meant you could apply early to any schools that were early action, and you could apply to as many as you'd like. There's a new thing out there now called either single choice. So you'll see SC early action or restrictive early action, REA. Read the fine print, follow if there's an asterisk beside the early action, go down to the bottom of the page, because there are a lot of schools now, a very common thing, if a private university that you're interested in applying to offers early action and they use the wording restrictive or single choice early action, they will allow you to apply typically to their institution plus any public institutions, but no additional private institutions early. Okay? Don't get yourself into trouble. Don't do something that breaks the rules, because they can toss out your application if you do that. Read the fine print. Okay? It is confusing. It is not necessarily straightforward. Ms. Hill, I'm seeing a hand raised.
Yeah, Mark, this is very good information. I think my question is just being able to identify what, if we're applying, if it's an early action school or early decision school, is that just going to be, how would I find that information or that language on their, on the website? How would I know that it is that type of school?
Yeah, good question. So these schools change year to year, and most schools have their options already listed, but there are going to be some that won't open up until August 1st, but you can just go to their application page and you can see what their application portal looks like, okay? Don't just assume because it's open on the CommonApp. They might just assume that you're applying regular decision, but you're way ahead of the game. The deadline for regular decision is December 31st, but you might be able to get that in on August 2nd, or you could be doing the early. So go to their website, look at their options. If you see ED1, ED2, that means early decision, that means binding. If you see single choice or restrictive early action, you can apply to multiple schools. Typically that, in my opinion, is an effort to keep you from applying to a bunch of private schools early. And public institutions typically give out the vast majority of their merit aid, their scholarship dollars, on the early cycle. Some schools won't even consider entering freshmen that apply regular for academic merit. Also, there is a benefit to applying early. I know a lot of people are probably thinking, why the heck would I do that if it's so confusing? You can apply twice, and for certain institutions, the acceptance rate is way higher, okay? It's not a perfect science, because you would assume that the kids who have all their stuff together and are ready to apply might be more competitive students, so it can be misleading. But like Dartmouth University, it's 5 times higher, 500% acceptance rate of their normal, okay? Vanderbilt has more than 300% higher acceptance rate. So they normally accept some, I think they're like above 25% on their early cycle for acceptance. And that is absolutely not the case for regular decision. So there are benefits to that. If you're worried about walking into murky waters and getting yourself into trouble, let us know. We'll walk you through it. We'll try to break out some of the confusion. You will have your Next Step coach partnered up, and you also have unlimited access to talk to me. I'd be more than happy to do it. Don't end up in a situation where you're bound to go to a school that you don't want to go to or that you can't afford to go to. Did I answer that question for you, Mrs. Hill? Okay. Any other questions out there? I have plenty of time to answer anything.
So is there like a certain part of the app that says, how do you request for a fee waiver? Like, how do you request for that? So is there like a certain part of the app, or do you have to request a fee waiver for every individual school?
Yeah, so there is going to be a limit on how many fee waivers you get, and that information, if you are eligible typically for fee waivers, I believe you find that through the CommonApp portal when you are doing your applications. I'm honestly not extremely well versed in that. Ms. Keys probably might be a better person, or the testing coordinator, Mindy.
Yeah, I just to jump in really quickly, I think that Mindy Byer will be able to help with the fee waivers, or at least kind of point us in the right direction and get us started with that. So I'll talk with her and find out what we need to know and make sure that we communicate that to all of our families of rising seniors. So that way, you have that information, and you know, you don't have to, because we don't want you to end up like getting stuck at a certain point and having to stop and, oh no, you know, we'll help out with that.
I believe that the fee waiver portion comes in at the end. So, and starting these early, that's another incentive to start on them early, because if it does take a couple days for paperwork to come through, you don't want to be pushing a deadline.
And we could
Oh,
ask
Mark.
a little, oh, my bad. You could go.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Carol.
So we can ask for letter of recommendations before we start the school year. So like if I were to email Mr. Weaver, am I able to do that?
I don't want to answer for Mr. Weaver, but I will. Yes, I think you could. I think you could email him now. It's always better to be early. You're not going to be able to get him officially into your CommonApp to be the person writing that letter until August 1st. But it's never too early to say, hey, Mr. Weaver, I'm thinking of you as writing one of my letters of rec. Keep in mind, you need more than one, but would you be comfortable doing that? And then, you know, ostensibly he says, absolutely. And then whenever he gets that email, he knows what's going on. And then if you put him in and he's like, I didn't get the email, then you can tell him, Mr. Weaver, check your spam or whatever the heck might be happening. And you'll at least, you'll be on the same page. I would go for it. I'd ask now.
Mr. Weaver just got back from vacation too, so he is rested and ready to write your recommendation, Rachel.
Put him to work. Any other questions, anyone? Go for
I
it.
did. So if we're, I guess, just kind of looking at the timeline that you shared with the FAFSA opening up in October, the deadlines mostly in December, and if the student has to take the ACT again, but apply to, you know, some of the schools, will they, if the scores are, I guess, higher after you've applied, will those schools change anything about, you know, the acceptance part? I mean, you know, as far as maybe finances.
Yeah, I mean,
or
that's a good question. That's another one where I'm kind of walking into a little bit of murky waters because I can't answer for every school. But that is a benefit to applying early. If you apply early and you get deferred, then you can take the test again, and that might be a big impact. I always say, you know, if you're not happy with your score, if you feel like there is meat left on the bone, like if you feel like you can make a better score, then go ahead and schedule it, take it again. They're going to consider your highest score, if nothing else. And I'm not just trying to give more money to the ACT and SAT, but you might be able to super score. You might be able to bump your score up. For your own sanity, that's what I did, right? Whenever I did not get into Yale early, I took the ACT again and bumped it up a little bit, and I'm sure that didn't hurt, right? There are certain schools as well that will allow you to take the SAT or ACT again in the spring. Okay, we're giving you general deadlines, but I would look it up because some schools will say, you know, you can take it again, and that once it gets sent in, before if it's sent in before they make their final decision, some schools will still consider it. Okay. The general deadline will be before you finish your application, but there are some opportunities to take it later. And then there's also an entirely different type of school, which is very rare, but like Harding University in Arkansas, they have a rolling admission, where Harding University, you can apply for Harding up until their freshman class enters. You know, I actually know some people that got in like 2 weeks before the fall of their freshman year, and you can take the SAT and change your scholarships or whatever a week before, but that's very rare. And if you see the words rolling admissions, it's probably better to just reach out and ask me what that means for that school, because a lot of schools use the same words to mean different things, you know, and it can get really confusing. You don't want to end up in a situation where it's going to cost you. But good question. I think someone else had Ms. Stockwell, was that you?
Hey, so my daughter is particularly interested in art and design schools. We've done a couple of visits. We've done Savannah College of Art and Design, Ringling College of Art and Design. She's actually taking a summer class right now. It's virtual, but through School of Chicago Institute, School of the Art Institute of Chicago. So there's several art schools that she's particularly looking at. From your experience, do art and design schools do CommonApp?
Mhm.
So that's the first part of my question. But secondly, I know that so many art schools are portfolio based. And what's your experience with portfolio based schools?
Yeah, good questions. So first, it depends on the school. I hate to say that, but I mean, there's no like this is exactly what they do for all of them. So SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, they use the Common App. I've had some students apply there. A lot of those portfolio schools, I mean, they may still accept other things like Common App. You'd be surprised at the breadth of the Common App. So I would look it up individually, and then for the portfolio, just like with anything else, whether it be your standardized tests or whatever, spend time getting everything together, put everything you can into that, make sure that you're putting all your energy into it, and talk to us about it, because with rising seniors, regardless of what their goals are, we're going down a pathway where we're discussing four-year universities. That's what the Common App is typically used for. I mean, there are a lot of art and design schools that will use the Common App. They may allow you to do things like under the additional information section, they may instruct you to upload portfolio or something like that. Whereas, if you're applying to a traditional school, that might be where you'd upload an award or your resume. But don't discount the potential to use that, because it is extremely widely used. And I would start doing research now of what their application portal looks like. So art and design schools are going to be much more likely to have their own internal portal, so you can upload past works and things like that. But I wouldn't entirely discount the Common App, and I also wouldn't entirely discount studying something like that at a traditional four-year school that has a strong proficiency in that. So, and I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you about that if you have any more questions.
Mark, thank you so much for all of this information and for sharing, your experience and wisdom. We really, really appreciate that. And again, everyone, if you need to contact Mark, his email address is in the chat. And if you're unable to see the chat for whatever reason, it's mark@brainsandbrawnllc.com. Yeah, thank you all so much.
Leah, this is Holly Rankin. Do we have time for one more question?
Oh, yeah, we can do one more, sure.
Okay. Mark, I don't know. And if you already talked about this, I can look at the recording later because I came a couple minutes late, but what's going on right now with for rising seniors for the testing? I know that last year, most of the schools were test optional because of COVID. What's going on with that?
Yeah, still a lot of test optionality out there. So not the end all be all. I do want to explain that test optional doesn't mean that they necessarily prefer you apply without a test. If you already know this, I'm not trying to cover ground we might have already talked about, but schools that tout test optionality, even the schools that are the most prolific in it, just always caution and look at how many students, like Bowdoin is the #1 test optional school in America. They've been doing it for more than 5 decades, and more than 70% of students walking around on Bowdoin's campus right now got in using the SAT or the ACT. So it might say they're test optional, but it's a little bit of a misleading piece of information. I think it's more for increasing their presence internationally and for students that might have a bigger issue. I think there are some questions that arise whenever the school might provide tests, but definitely, I mean, that's still out there. A lot of schools are still test deferred. There are some exceptions. All the University of California state school, the public university system, is not even allowed to consider the SAT or the ACT for the next 4 years. So there are some schools that are saying like not only test optional, but like test not allowed. But for the vast majority, test optional programs are still carrying over at least 1 more year.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to put such a long qualifier on that. I just think a lot of people misunderstand what that means.
Yeah, Holly, I'm glad that you brought that up. That was a great final question that came up in a couple of conversations that I had last week. And I'm glad to know that answer, Mark. Thank you. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, it's really wonderful to see some of your faces and hear voices, and just to know that you're here with us. So we really appreciate you coming. And Mark, again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom all of this information. I
Absolutely.
will be in touch as usual, with the communication about deadlines and of course, to be able to connect you all to Mark at Brains and Brawn. And, in the coming weeks, we will connect you all with your coaches again, if you need to connect with them. But yeah, we're looking forward to seeing your children who look like adults. Oh my gosh. Sorry, we're looking forward to seeing your children in a couple of weeks in person. It will be really nice to be all back together. So thanks for coming tonight. And I hope
Thank you, Leah.
Yeah.
There are more presentations coming, guys. So if you haven't seen that calendar that Ms. Key sent out, please look at it because we're going to be covering a lot of these other topics. It's extremely important, and I hope to see more people on the next one.
Yeah. Thank you all again and have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Mark and Leah, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Oh, we lost him.
Oh no.
He was fast off the draw.